we're going to talk about free will with Jack, he, him in Maryland. Hey, Jack, you're talking with Secularity and Jim Barrows. What is up?
Oh, not much, guys. How you doing?
Oh, pretty good, man. So yeah, what I'll go ahead. I'll start off. I'll put some cards on the table. Jim, tell me if you feel differently, but I'm not convinced that free will actually is a thing. So you might have to give me an argument for free will before you give me an argument for God using free will. Jim, where do you fall on that?
Pretty close to that, I think. Uh, there's some really interesting speculation regarding quantum physics that would indicate that even if presented with the exact same situation over again, we might make a different decision, but that might be due to more to quantum fluctuations than anything else. But yeah, as a general rule, you need to prove that we have libertarian free will in some way, shape, or form.
So barring a deeper understanding of quantum weirdness, it sounds like Jim and I pretty much come down on the same on the same side there. But no, I mean that is a good point. That is a good point. Yeah. So Jack, what with all that on the table, what do you got for us, man?
Yeah, I mean, well, to be honest, you guys may have this may not be relevant to you, Mac, this case, because it is sort of an if-then argument from free will. I'm happy to talk about why I believe in free will, or why I think other people are reasonable to believe in free will. But just to be clear, if free will isn't accepted, I don't have an argument for God.
Let's hear the argument, the if then in incorporating free will, right? Because maybe there's still something else that Jim and I have a problem with when it comes to that construction in and of itself. Like maybe we could do the, okay, cool, we grant the free will part of it, because there's still this further problem, down the road. So lay it out for us real quick, and if we find okay, yeah, we really need to hash out more on why you believe free will, we'll go down that route, because that's always interesting too, I think.
Yeah, so I would start kind of from a cosmological place. This is not the sum total of my argument, but just the assertion that the universe needs an uncaused cause. I know, obviously, that there are plenty of atheists who will often point out that there's no reason in that specific statement to assume that uncaused cause has to be a God, has to be conscious, anything like that.
Right.
But that is kind of the first premise of the argument. So if you guys want to talk about that first, we can, or I can just move on to the next three, and then that'll be done.
Jim, where do you want to go?
I'll
let you drive.
I'm willing to let the kalam stand as it is. I think quantum physics completely blows it out of the water. But yeah, I'll let it stand for now.
Cool. So yeah, give us the next step, Jack.
All right. So if the universe needs an uncaused cause, and free will truly exists, meaning that free will is not contingent on anything, is not caused by anything, it is our free decision to do a thing irregardless of physics like Jim was talking about, or any sort of chemical necessity. If free will exists, it is an uncaused cause. If it is the only uncaused cause that we know of, then I would argue it is rational to assume that the universe was created by a consciousness. And the reason I would assert this is basically like in nature.
Okay, hang on just a second, Jack. Hang on, because I found where I have a problem. You're doing the thing that one of our previous callers was doing, right? Where you're saying if the only evidence we have currently is free will being the only uncaused cause, right? Then that means, this other conclusion over here, right? The problem with saying that is you haven't done the necessary steps to get to that conclusion. What that tells us is that currently this may be the best option that we know of, but to rest our laurels and say this is the answer is not possible. That it's still the argument from incredulity, because we haven't been able to rule out all of the other potential causes. We've ruled out potential causes that we know of currently. how do we know tomorrow we don't find another potential cause? And if that's possible
Sure.
in and of itself, then all we can say with this construction so far, again, with us granting, a bunch of good stuff to get here, we're saying, okay, let's just say free will is an uncaused cause. Let's just say free will is the only thing that we know of, right? Uh, let's just say agents are the only thing that we know of that have this free will. Therefore, the only thing that could possibly have created everything was the only uncaused cause we know about. Nope. See, that's the leap. That's the leap you made.
Yeah,
And so,
I understand.
again, if you just change the wording to currently, the most likely answer would be this, that just shores it up a little bit. But then it doesn't have the same weight that I think it needs to have to get to the conclusion of God, right?
Yeah,
Because God's not a
I
most
totally
likely,
understand.
God's a definite. He does exist in your
Well,
view.
Sure, but like it's sort of the same way I would look at science, right? Like if we found a mineral in the ground, like iron, say, and we know that there is a certain process which creates the molecular structure of iron. We don't know there isn't some other process that might create that iron that we might find one day. But you would not be irrational to say that if you find iron in the ground, that the only process we've ever find is what we assume happened. Like that's how.
Boom. You wouldn't be
science works.
irrational to say that, but you would be irrational to say what you said, which would be there is only one way to create iron. If we find iron in the ground, it must be from this singular process. The first thing you said, I'm on board with, but the thing that I said is more analogous to the thing that you said initially with God. Does that make sense?
And
Sure.
Yeah, Jim, please.
I kind of want to back up a little bit. And you said, I think you said that free will is an uncaused cause. Is that correct, what you said?
Yeah, I would say if free will is not an uncaused cause, then it's not my definition of free will. That's like how I would define free will.
So, but we don't have any example of a free will existing without the 3 pounds of fat that sits between our ears. So is that, do you have an example of a free will that exists without a brain?
Well, I suppose not.
How do you get to free will as an uncaused cause? And I'm granting you libertarian free will, just to be clear. I'm granting that. How do you get to an uncaused cause if free will depends on a brain?
Very good point.
Well, because I would argue that the presence of a brain doesn't necessarily cause free will. We have children who are born basically brain dead, and they have the same physical makeup for the most part, including some things that doctors even can't figure out themselves.
Do we have
really
any demonstration of free will coming? Something that you would classify as free will? Do we have any demonstration of that being in something that does not have the squishy mass in our head? Do we have any example of that whatsoever? Like, it seems like this bottle definitely does not have a brain, definitely not like mine. I haven't looked at mine entirely, but I'm pretty confident. Does this bottle have free will, or is there any other demonstration in that category? Because if not,
I would say
go ahead.
None to the degree of skepticism, which I think
I think Jim's point. I think Jim's point holds a lot of weight. Then,
do you mind if I kick you while you're down? Because I got one. I got one more.
So, right, Jack? At least that's the kindest way for anybody to do that.
We have examples of human beings with brain damage whose emotional centers of the brain have been damaged. These people cannot make a decision. They're hungry. They know they need to eat, but they cannot decide to eat even. This is how far it goes. Do they have free will?
No, I suppose they don't.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up, Jim, truly, because
So
that was something that I was thinking.
So what you just said to me is that free will is dependent on active emotional centers of the brain.
Well, it would seem to be that way, but I guess I would just say, like, to my, like, I would assume, like I said, going on with soul or something. I get it, but yeah.
Right. You see why I asked the question, right? Because it kind of puts a damper on my granting you that true free will exists, right? The libertarian free will exists. It kind of kicks that right in the nuts, I think. But you still have to, since there is no way for us to say, or there is no reason to believe that free will or a mind exists without a brain. We have no reason to conclude that. Wouldn't that seem to indicate that is it correlational mind to brain, or is it causal brain to mind?
Yeah, I mean, it would, well, correlation doesn't equal causation, but it would seem to suggest that it was causal brain to mind.
No, so free will is not an uncaused cause.
Yeah, we at least need the cause of the brain, right? And a specific wiring of the brain. It's not just any construction of the brain. It has to be this really, really limited set of what it, the form that it can take.
Right.
But no, I'm glad you went down that route, Jim. That was definitely something that was coming up to my mind as well. That was a little difficult.
Yeah. So we're still not we're not at an uncaused cause here, right? We don't have any reason to accept an uncaused cause when it comes to free will. Just to come back to the point, right?
I can give my reason why I feel free will exists. And
let's hit that real quick.
It basically is. Yeah, it kind of seems like a logical necessity to me. Like, I understand what Jim is saying about, questions about, the brain being contingent, or being the thing which determines free will. And obviously, if you look at Darwinian evolution, it's not like there's a very clear line to say this was an ape and this was a man and this thing that was before an ape, was whatever, and it had this level of consciousness. But it's sort of like the problem of hard solipsism to me, because I perceive myself as having free will. And if I don't have free will, then it would seem to me that the world is just as much a sort of illusion as any sort of hard solipsis problem would suggest. So it's like, I don't know, I wouldn't know how to reason.
I mean, why, what's the problem if it is the case? Like, what's the problem if, for instance, okay, like truly, my lights turn out, my brain shuts down, my organs fail, and then I have this experience of waking up again, and some, I don't know, futuristic-y scientist pulls something off the top of my head and says, "Hey, man, wasn't that shit crazy? It was all a simulation. You were actually the only conscious creature in that entire existence." Does that, like, what does that actually change about any of the things that happened, right? Like, I still had conversations with people. 1 + 1 still equals 2, like it just doesn't seem to actually be problematic if we are truly living in a simulation. It doesn't seem to have any problems, right? And the same thing is true, at least from my perspective, on free will. Like, I get the understanding of, like, well, it just kind of feels like it's one of those you have to grants, otherwise you can't move forward. And it's like, let's investigate that then. Like, is it possible that everything in existence had something that determined it? And if so, like, what's the problem with us being where we are now based on that chain, right? And in fact, I would ask that. Is there anything out there that doesn't have something that determined it, that doesn't have some cause beforehand? It sounds like we're going to get to the one thing. We're going to get to the singular thing that violates the rule that every other thing has to fall under. And that's the problem of special pleading. So we're just back to the same problem that we were with one of the other callers again. So I get why it seems reasonable on the face, right? I get the intuition. But I think when we really investigate that intuition, what we find is that it really just is a claim that doesn't have anything to support it. And we don't need to assume that claim to make progress. We need to assume logic. We need to assume there's something else out there other than me, but we don't need to assume that I have this, ability to do things that are not determined by prior causal chains. We can still make progress without that assumption.
I mean, look, I don't want to take any more of your guys' time than you want to give, or just overstay my welcome.
I think it was a good call.
I
think it was great, Jack.
Yeah, I guess I just would say that, like, I don't know, if I can't be sure of my own existence in the sense that I'm free, I don't see how you can build like like you said, we have to assume logic. And I would agree, but I just don't understand how you can have logic without consciousness. And that's sort of the problem I come to.
Again,
you can't.
I think that's going to take us down a route.
Right. And I agree with you. See, logic and math are the map. They're not the territory. Mm-hmm. And maps only exist because consciousness exists. Doesn't mean the territory doesn't. Right?
Right. Mm-hmm. Yeah. It seems to be the case that if all human minds had never existed, but everything else about the universe was exactly the same as it is right now, but no human conscious minds ever existed or will ever exist, it seems that the codification of mathematics doesn't happen. But the actual things that mathematics is describing still do. A single rock that gets split because another rock falls on it is now 2 rocks, baby. Whether or not somebody is there to come along and go, yes, this is because it falls within the 3 foundational understandings of logic. A must equal A cannot be not A. We don't need that for the thing to still be the case. What we do need, we need the conscious people to make the codification. We need us as people to write the shit down for sure. Right. But I think, Jack, you touched on something that will lead to a very long and interesting conversation. And so I am going to say to you the exact thing I said to the other callers, which is we are going to let you go now. But it was a great freaking call, I think.
Absolutely.
Yeah, you definitely need to call us back. I am going to be stingy on this one, Jack. You call back when Jim or myself are on again, and not before that. No, seriously, Jack. It was a great call.
It was a good
man.
conversation.
Thank you so much.